let's look at in our draft, in the Draft Rugby OG League draft, and also Rev can give some input from his drafts. But what were the top picks by position? So a lot of them are pretty clear and obvious. I think we've already mentioned a few of them just in picking our top three players, but we've gone through, let's just go through all the positions. So whilst I love talking about props all day, you're hearing my voice enough. So Rev, do you want to take us through props?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've touched on, the GOAT prop, Angus Bell. I think should have been going top, at least top five in all drafts. Like, he is an absolute gun. And sort of nipping at the heels, a little distance away, but still powerhouse props. Tene Latupo, Alan Alalatoa, and I think also Angus Bell's partner in crime, Harry Johnson Holmes. Just, when you factor in how important tackles and runs are for props, and they're absolute dynamite. So plenty of strong options, and realistically, I think they went a lot earlier than previous years props have gone, just seeing how dynamic Angus Bell was last year.
He definitely got the ball rolling. Once the first prop goes, the panic starts to set in that you miss Angus Bell, and now what are you going to be left with?
That's it. Well, I mean, he's the first prop ever to top a fantasy season, in the history of fantasy. So if that alone isn't a big enough statement, then, I don't know what is. So Harry, do you want to take us through hookers?
Yeah. I mentioned Cody Taylor, number one pick. I think he's always the number one pick. He's just so consistent, and I just don't think he has much competition this year again, probably even less, to be honest. So I think he's going to have a big one. Asafoetmoa, he's our second top at the moment, and that's based off the fact that I think his average last year was fourth. Oh, no, sorry, it was third all up at a 40-point average, and he came off the bench for half his games. So he's the only player in the competition, apart from Will Jordan, that it makes absolutely no difference if he starts or benches. You'll put him in your starting team every single week. So with the continued aging of his competition, I think that Asafoetmoa will be absolutely massive this year. And if he does get a lot of game time, I could see him actually usurping Cody Taylor as the number one. I've then got Samasoni Takayaho as my next. I think we're talking about him pre-pod, that after such a big year, he's such a wrecking ball of a runner. If the Chiefs rolling mauls on point, I think he could be right up there with the others as well and really challenge for top spot. And then finally, a player that was my favourite a couple of seasons ago, Kurt Eckland. I think he's just another really dynamic player that scores well and scores very, very consistently. I think he had a bit of a challenge for his jersey last year, but no more. I think Lotaru Tolai, who took some minutes off him, has gone over to, I'm going to say, Moana Pacifica. So I think it's his jersey now, and he'll go very, very well this year as well.
Yeah, Rev, what do you make of Kurt Eckland? I've gone on record many times saying that, look, and it's not just because he's not an Islander, but he just doesn't excite me. I don't see what everyone sees in him, but what do you make of Kurt Eckland?
I think his dad must be a silverback gorilla, because he is built like an absolute machine. Like, he's a mammoth man. So I really like him. I was surprised that he was brought into the Blues. I think his injury cover last year, he wasn't even in the original squad at some point. So I couldn't really see how they rated him beneath the likes of Ray Newer, and I think even one of the other players they had there was Lotaru Tolai, or someone else in the squad was getting picked ahead of him. So because of injuries, he got a bit of a run, and I thought he was really damaging in everything he did. I'm keen to see how he fights for minutes with Riccatelli. I think that's a pretty good dynamic they've got there. Two pretty intense ball carriers, and they like putting a shot on. They're not the most stable line-out throwers, but I'm keen to see both of them have a crack at the Blues.
Yeah, fair. I think last year, maybe even the year before, probably just last year, I was definitely calling for Asafoetmoa to just move to Auckland. I thought he'd have it mortgaged on the jersey instead of competing with Dane Coles, and Ricky Riccatelli has served the Hurricanes so well for many years. So it was hard for them to phase him out. They had to keep giving him game time, and so yeah. But okay, no, interesting. Well, that brings us on to locks, and we have the return of a great lock. I'm going to get the year wrong. I think it was 2014 Rugby World Player of the Year. It's 2014 or 15. I
think you're right.
Brody Retallick. Obviously an incredibly old man now at, I think he's 30 years old. Actually, probably need to double check that. But he's back after his break, and will be starting for the Chiefs. He obviously went straight back into the All Blacks last year. And I mean, you can't really say enough about him. He is, if he's in form, he's the best lock in the world without parallel, as far as I'm concerned, even still at the age of 30. And he offers everything. He's got power ball running, skills, offloads, try assists, you name it, he'll do it. So he was the top lock for us, and I think he went really early in your draft, Rev. I think we were saying he went 17th.
Yeah.
Whereas he made it down to, I think it was 30. Was it 31st, Harry, for us, or something around there? Thought I put that in there, but I haven't.
He went in 28th. 28. I think. Oh, no, 28th in one of Rev's and 31st in ours, yeah.
In ours, right. So anyway, Brody, definitely the top lock option. Followed by, in our draft, we had Sam Whitelock, who just had an absolute gun year last year, just really consistent. I don't think anyone's ever questioned his consistency, but just his average points really went up last year and was just rock solid throughout. So pretty hard to go wrong with him. Again, one of the best locks in the world, one of the most consistent locks in the world. And he's in the All Blacks and the Crusaders. What more can you want? So, and then of course a player after Rev's heart, Lukan Sakai Lotto, the tall building, as we refer to him as. Would just love to see him get that body height down a little bit, but absolute weapon. Really, he's been a gun in fantasy the last couple of years and could have easily gone the second pick lock. So he's huge. It's
a pretty tight contest there between Lucan, Matt Phillip, Isaac Rodder. I feel like there's a lot of competition there for the next spot. My question was for Rev on Retallick. How worried are you by the form he showed in the All Blacks last year and how that might transfer to his fantasy footy season? Because I think he went back to, the elder statesman, just the physical presence, maybe not quite the dynamic ball player he was back when he was by far and away the best lock in the game in fantasy footy.
Yeah, I think it's going to be hard to see him get to the same heights he has achieved in fantasy footy before, but I still think he's going to come in because he's got the skill set. Like the amount of times that he can hit a half gap and just pop an offload off and, create an opportunity for someone else. He's got very surprisingly good hands for someone his size and someone that I guess looks as sort of gangly as he does. Like he really does distribute the ball quite well. So fantasy-wise, I think he will come good at the Chiefs. But I do think he will take a bit of time to get back up to speed with how, I guess, intense Super Rugby is and how intense the Test Rugby arena was compared to his time in Japan.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point. In Japan, he would have been having a great old time, and it wouldn't be too tough on the body. A lot of like conditioning training, just getting fit enough, but you just don't take those hard knocks anywhere like you will in Super Rugby. So, very good point. All right, well, who are we up to? Rev, do you want to take us through the back rowers? One of the two positions in fantasy where you get to pick 4 in your team, and so one of the most important. How did that shape up?
Back row is one of the best areas, I think, because for me there was at least 6 standouts going into the draft. So I thought, really set here. This will go great. Ended up with none of them. So draft went really poorly in that regard, but. Really, if you had the options of Hoskins Tutu, Artie Sevilla, Luke Jacobson, Shannon Frizzell, Akira Ioane, and Harry Wilson, you wouldn't be upset with any of them as your first choice back row. They're a really good set of options. So I think that's a nice a group of players to choose from. And the nice thing is there's actually quite a decent group in the step below. Like even your Pete Summers, your Hoopers, the Soa Coolers. There's a whole heap of players that are sort of great picks in their own right. So. To me, there was no really bad pick you could have made for your first back row, but I think still the standouts are Artie Sevilla, recently renamed captain, Hoskins Tutu just keeps carving it up at All Black level and at Blues level, and also probably Luke Jacobson, who now doesn't have the competition of Lachlan Boshier. He's not taking one of the back row positions, and he's just shown that when he strings games together, he's an absolute freak. Some really nice involvements at the Chiefs and the All Blacks. So. Yep, I'm looking at the list and nearly in tears because I've got none of them, and I just know my players are going to struggle up against them. So, yeah, there's the back rowers for us.
I thought the biggest thing was it dropped off pretty heavily in the back half of the back rowers. But how much do you, Craigs, reckon Artie Sevilla's high rating in this? And don't get me wrong, he's always going to be rock solid, but I'm hearing about him going, Rev, I think in one of your drafts in the 8th or 9th overall pick. How much is his rating based off his 2019 form? So his average last year was 33, 2020 was 31, 2019 was 52 points. and then the year before that 39. So I guess my worry is he's probably not nearly as good as what he used to be, but he's still been rated as arguably the best back rower in the game.
Look, I think he is still one of the best back rowers in the game.
From a fantasy perspective, sorry.
Yeah, no, I think he still has absolutely potential to do that, to have a 50-point average again. You know what I mean? It's I think in those 2 last seasons, they were both disrupted seasons, but one of them he was injured a fair bit of it. I think in the second one he kind of I distinctly remember I had him in my fantasy team, and you were giving it to me, of course, every day about how he's injured, he's washed up, Artie Severe, it's all done. No, okay, I'll take it a bit far there. But and then he did come good. So he did start pulling a string of games together. So I mean, look, if he's fit and healthy, I don't think anyone would question that Artie's, one of the best top 5 back rowers in the world rugby.
Yeah.
So I think he definitely still could produce a 40 to 50 point average, capable of doing that this year. But I agree, the numbers don't support that as much for the last 2 years, Harry. And as Harry drafts purely unemotionally, just off the numbers, unlike I just pick everything off gut instinct. But yeah, no, it's a good point. But look, I mean, he's captaining. He's really going to play a lot of minutes, I think, to lead that team around. Duplessis Karifi, as we say every week, will be off the field more than he's on the field, from seeing the cheese every game. So when those add up, eventually he'll get a suspension for 10 weeks or something. You know what I mean? So
yeah, sure.
But, yeah, and what excites me with the back rows, I agree. There did feel like a bit of a drop off. There's a few people who might come completely out of the blue. I mean, we'll talk about them later, but the point for me that's exciting is the inclusion of the Fijian Drua and the Moana Pacifica team, because their entire forward packs, apart from the front row, are basically back rowers, and they will all be amazing. So I remember going to the Drua side, and after the front row, they don't really have locks. You know what I mean? They just have like 10 number 8s really in their team, and so we just got to wait to see who's playing, and I'm sure they'll all come good. So
it's got to be Duranalangi and Thrikin Deveta, I think, surely, between Moana Pacifica and Fiji Drua, surely.
Yeah.